The mansion's silence shattered like glass when Damien Villaroche heard his daughter's laughter echoing from the dance hall, a sound that hadn't graced these walls since the accident 3 years ago. He froze in the marble corridor, his hand instinctively moving to the Glock beneath his tailored jacket. In his world, unexpected sounds meant danger, but this wasn't gunfire or breaking glass. This was joy. Pure, innocent joy from his 8-year-old daughter, who had been trapped in darkness since the car crash that stole both her sight and her mother. Damien's ice-blue eyes narrowed as he approached the rarely used dance hall, his Italian leather shoes silent against the polished floor. Through the crack in the door, he glimpsed something that made his blood run cold, not from fear, but from an emotion he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. His maid, the quiet girl from Portland he'd hired without a second thought, was holding Elowen's small hands, guiding her through gentle dance steps. "Trust me, sweetheart." Callie's soft voice drifted through the air. "Feel the floor beneath your feet. I'm right here with you." Damien's world tilted on its axis. In that moment, watching a stranger accomplish what teams of expensive specialists couldn't, he realized he was about to discover a truth that would either save his family or destroy everything he thought he knew about love. The Seattle rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Villaroche mansion, like bullets against bulletproof glass, a sound Damien knew all too well. He stood in his office, watching the morning mist roll across Elliott Bay. At 40, Damien Villaroche commanded the most powerful crime family on the West Coast with the same cold precision that had earned him the nickname the Ice King among his enemies. His reflection in the window showed a man carved from marble and menace, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of winter storms. A crisp white dress shirt hung open at the collar, the top 4 buttons undone to reveal the muscular chest that bore scars from a dozen wars, and the elegant wolf tattoo on the side of his neck. His platinum Rolex Submariner caught the grey morning light as he lifted his coffee cup. 3 years. 3 years since the accident that had stolen his wife and left his daughter blind, trapped in a world of darkness that he couldn't navigate, couldn't fix, couldn't control. And control was everything to Damien Villaroche. "Sir?" Victor's gravelly voice interrupted his thoughts. His Russian lieutenant stood in the doorway, built like a tank and twice as deadly. "The new maid is here for her first day." Damien barely glanced up. "Handle it." "Eleanor's showing her around. Callie Moreno, 26, from Portland. Background check came back clean. Too clean, actually. No criminal record, no debts, no connections. Just a girl running from something." "Aren't we all?" Damien murmured, his attention already shifting to the stack of reports on his desk. Territory disputes, shipment schedules, and the endless dance of violence and money that kept his empire running. 2 floors above, Callie Moreno stood in the marble foyer, trying not to let her jaw drop at the sheer opulence surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from vaulted ceilings, and artwork that belonged in museums lined the walls. She clutched her worn duffel bag tighter, acutely aware of her thrift store clothes against the pristine marble. "The master's quarters are off limits," Eleanor, the stern English governess, was saying in clipped tones. "As is his office, the wine cellar, and the 3rd floor east wing. You'll clean the common areas, assist Rosa in the kitchen, and under no circumstances are you to disturb Mr. Villaroche or his daughter." Callie nodded, her dark eyes taking in every detail. She'd learned to read people and places quickly, survival skill from years of moving between foster homes and shelters. This house felt like a beautiful prison, all marble and gold, but cold as a tomb. "The child," Eleanor continued, her voice softening slightly, "Miss Elowen has been through considerable trauma. She doesn't speak to strangers, doesn't like to be touched, and has episodes. You're not to interact with her beyond basic courtesy." "Episodes?" Callie asked quietly. "Panic attacks, screaming fits. She's seen more specialists than I can count, but—" Eleanor's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine concern. "Nothing helps. The poor lamb is lost in her own world." As if summoned by their conversation, a small figure appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Elowen Villaroche was 8 years old, but seemed younger, fragile as spun glass, with her father's sharp features softened by youth and her mother's golden hair. She moved carefully, one hand trailing along the banister, her sightless blue eyes staring straight ahead. Callie's heart clenched. She recognized that careful, defensive posture, the way the girl held herself like she was expecting the world to hurt her. It was the same way Callie had moved through her childhood, invisible and unwanted. "Miss Elowin," Eleanor called. "Come say hello to Callie, our new maid." The little girl froze, her small hands gripping the banister. For a moment, Callie thought she might bolt. Instead, Elowin descended the stairs with painful precision, each step calculated and careful. "Hello?" she whispered when she reached the bottom, her voice barely audible. "Hi, Elowin," Callie said softly, crouching down to the girl's level. "I'm Callie. I like your dress. It's blue, right? Blue like the ocean." Elowin's head tilted slightly, the first sign of interest she'd shown. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess. Blue's my favorite color, too." For just a moment, the ghost of a smile flickered across Elowin's face before disappearing. Then she was moving again, her hand finding the wall as she navigated toward the library. That night, as Callie lay in her small but comfortable room in the staff quarters, she could hear crying through the walls. Soft, heartbroken sobs that seemed to echo through the mansion's perfect halls. The next morning, she found Elowin sitting alone on the library floor, surrounded by braille books she couldn't quite manage, tears streaming down her face as her small fingers fumbled over the raised dots. "Nobody teaches me anything," the little girl whispered to herself, unaware she had an audience. "Nobody shows me how." Callie's heart shattered. Without thinking, she stepped into the room and quietly sat down beside Elowin. "Can I sit with you?" she asked gently. Elowin's head snapped up, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "You're not supposed to," Eleanor said. "Eleanor's not here," Callie said simply. "And sometimes the rules don't matter as much as helping someone who needs it." For the first time since the accident, Elowin Villaroche smiled. 3 weeks passed like whispered secrets in the Villaroche mansion. Callie moved through her duties with quiet efficiency, but her real work began in the stolen moments when she found Elowin alone and forgotten in the vast, cold spaces of her father's empire. It started with stories. Callie would sit cross-legged on the library floor, her voice painting pictures that Elowin could see with her heart instead of her eyes. Then came the games, simple things that helped the little girl navigate her world with confidence instead of fear. "Feel this," Callie would whisper, placing different objects in Elowin's hands. Smooth like glass, rough like tree bark, soft like clouds. Slowly, carefully, Elowin began to bloom. Her panic attacks became less frequent. She started asking questions, her curiosity awakening like a flower turning toward the sun. And for the first time in 3 years, laughter began to echo through the mansion's halls. Damien noticed the change, of course. He noticed everything. It was what kept him alive in a world where weakness meant death. His daughter seemed lighter somehow, less fragile. The expensive specialist he'd hired claimed credit, but something nagged at him. The timing was wrong. The revelation came on a Thursday afternoon when a deal went sideways, leaving Damien in a foul mood and dangerous temper. He'd returned to the mansion earlier than usual, his Italian leather shoes silent against the marble as he stalked through the halls like a predator seeking prey. That's when he heard it. Laughter. Pure, joyful laughter that stopped him dead in his tracks. His daughter's laughter. Damien followed the sound like a man possessed, his hand instinctively checking the Glock holstered beneath his jacket. The laughter was coming from the dance hall, a room he'd avoided since his wife's death. He pushed open the heavy oak door and froze. Callie stood in the center of the room, holding Elowin's small hands in hers, guiding the little girl through gentle dance steps. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting them both in golden light. Elowin's face was radiant with joy. Her sightless eyes closed in concentration as she trusted Callie to lead her. "That's it, sweetheart," Callie was saying, her voice soft and encouraging. "Feel the music in your heart. Let your body follow the rhythm. I'm right here with you. I won't let you fall." Damien's world tilted on its axis. In 3 years, he'd hired the best specialists money could buy. None of them had managed to bring back his daughter's smile. But this girl, this nobody from Portland, with her thrift store clothes and careful manner, had accomplished the impossible. When Callie noticed him standing in the doorway, she dropped Elowin's hands like they were on fire, her face draining of color. She stepped back, her body language screaming guilt and terror. "Mr. Villaroche, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Explain." The word came out low and dangerous, the voice that had made grown men beg for mercy. Callie's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her simple dress, and Damien found himself noticing details he'd ignored before. The way she carried herself like someone used to making herself invisible, the careful way she spoke as if every word might be used against her. "She helps me, Daddy," Elowin said suddenly, moving to stand protectively in front of Callie. "She teaches me things, real things." Damien's ice-blue gaze shifted between his daughter and the maid who had somehow accomplished what he couldn't. "Follow me," he said to Callie, his tone brooking no argument. His office was a temple to power and intimidation. Dark wood, leather, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne and danger. Callie stood in the center of the room like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Damien moved to stand behind his desk, the massive piece of furniture serving as a barrier between them. His platinum Rolex caught the light as he placed his hands flat on the polished surface. "You've been teaching my daughter without permission," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Explain why I shouldn't fire you right now." Callie lifted her chin, and for a moment Damien saw steel beneath the fear. "Because she was drowning," she said quietly, "and nobody else was throwing her a lifeline." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Excuse me. Your daughter is brilliant and beautiful, and so hungry to learn it breaks my heart. But everyone treats her like she's made of glass, like her blindness makes her helpless. It doesn't. She just needs someone to believe in her." "And you think you're qualified to make that determination?" Damien's voice was ice and razors. "You, a maid with no education, no training, no credentials?" "No," Callie admitted, and the honesty in her voice surprised him. "I'm not qualified for anything. I don't have degrees or certificates or fancy titles, but I know what it's like to be invisible, to be forgotten, to feel like nobody cares if you exist or not. And I couldn't stand by and watch her feel that way." Something in her tone made Damien pause. He studied her face, really looked at her for the first time since she'd started working for him. She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 26, with the kind of understated beauty that revealed itself slowly. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, dark and deep, holding secrets and pain that reminded him uncomfortably of his own reflection. "Tell me about yourself." "Callie Moreno," he said, settling back in his chair. "The real story." For a moment he thought she might refuse. Then her shoulders sagged slightly, and he realized she was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. "I grew up in foster care," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bounced between homes until I aged out at 18, lived in shelters, worked whatever jobs I could find. I came to Seattle because I needed a fresh start, somewhere nobody knew my story." "What story?" Damien found himself asking. Callie's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "The story of the girl nobody wanted. The one who was always too much trouble, too damaged, too broken to be worth saving." The raw honesty in her voice hit him like a sucker punch. "And my daughter. She reminds me of myself at that age," Callie admitted, lost and scared and so desperate for someone to see her, really see her, that she'd take any scrap of attention. But she's not broken, Mr. Villaroche. She's just waiting for someone to help her find her way." Damien was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain painted patterns on the windows. "You'll continue teaching her," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "But you'll do it properly. I'll arrange for you to work with her tutors, learn the correct methods." Callie's eyes widened in surprise. "You're not firing me." "I'm promoting you," Damien said, though he wasn't entirely sure why. "Elowin's companion and teacher. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly." "I don't understand," Callie whispered, tears gathering in her dark eyes. "Why?" Damien stood and moved around the desk, stopping just close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Because," he said quietly, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name, "in 3 years, You're the first person to make my daughter smile, and that makes you either very dangerous or very valuable. Which do you think I am? Callie asked, her voice barely audible. Damien's ice-blue eyes searched her face, looking for deception, for hidden agendas, for the catch that always came with things that seemed too good to be true, but all he saw was honesty, hope, and a strength that had been forged in fire. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I intend to find out. The transformation of Eloine Villaroche became the talk of the mansion's staff. Within 2 weeks of Callie's official promotion to companion, the little girl who had been a ghost haunting the halls began to emerge like a butterfly from its cocoon. She navigated the mansion with growing confidence, her small hands no longer trembling as they traced familiar walls and furniture. Callie had turned learning into an adventure. She created tactile maps of each room using different textures, taught Eloine to identify people by their footsteps, even their cologne. Most importantly, she gave the child something she'd been missing since the accident: hope. Feel this, Callie said one morning, placing a smooth river stone in Eloine's palm. They sat in the mansion's conservatory, surrounded by the gentle sound of rainfall and the earthy scent of Rosa's herb garden. What does it remind you of? Eloine turned the stone over in her small fingers, her face scrunched in concentration. It's warm from the sun, and smooth-like Daddy's watch when he hugs me. Callie smiled, though Eloine couldn't see it. That's beautiful. Now what if I told you this stone came from a beach in Italy, where your daddy's family is from? Really? Eloine's face lit up with wonder. Tell me about Italy. As Callie spun tales of Mediterranean coastlines and ancient cities, neither of them noticed Damien standing in the conservatory doorway. He'd been watching these sessions for days now, drawn by his daughter's laughter, like a moth to flame. Each time, he discovered something new about the quiet woman who had somehow unlocked his daughter's world. Callie wasn't just teaching Eloine to navigate blindness, she was teaching her to embrace life. She showed the little girl how to cook by smell and touch, how to identify birds by their songs, how to dance to music only she could hear. She's good for her, Victor's gravelly voice interrupted his thoughts. His lieutenant stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the lesson with approval. The kid's like a different person. I can see that, Damien murmured. Can you? Victor's pale blue eyes studied his boss with the familiarity of 15 years of loyalty. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're seeing something else entirely. Damien's jaw tightened. Meaning? Meaning you've been watching the teacher as much as the student, Victor said bluntly, and that's either very good or very dangerous. Before Damien could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. Vincent Romano's name flashed on the screen, and his blood turned to ice. Romano, Damien answered, his voice carefully neutral as he stepped away from the conservatory. Villaroche. Vincent's Brooklyn accent was thick with false friendliness. Heard interesting things about your operation lately. Word is you've gone soft, spending more time playing house than handling business. Damien's grip tightened on the phone. My business is running just fine. What do you want? What I want is to discuss some territorial adjustments. Seems like you might be too distracted to properly manage your West Coast interests. The threat was clear. Vincent had been circling like a vulture for months, looking for any sign of weakness to exploit. I appreciate your concern, Damien said, his voice dropping to the deadly calm that had earned him his reputation. But I assure you, my focus is exactly where it needs to be. Is it? Because from what I hear, you've got yourself a little pet project, a maid who's got you wrapped around her finger. The line went dead, leaving Damien staring at his phone with murder in his eyes. Vincent knew about Callie. Somehow the bastard had gotten intelligence about the mansion's inner workings. Problem? Victor appeared at his elbow. Vincent Romano thinks I've gone soft, Damien said quietly. He's testing boundaries. And? Damien's smile was razor-sharp and twice as deadly. He's about to learn why they call me the Ice King. But as he walked back toward his office, his eyes found Callie and Eloine again. The woman was reading to his daughter now, her voice soft and melodic. Eloine sat curled against her side, completely trusting, completely safe. For the first time in his criminal career, Damien felt the weight of having something to lose. That evening, as the mansion settled into its nighttime routine, Callie tucked Elowyn into bed with their usual ritual. She'd taught the little girl to identify different essential oils by scent: lavender for calm dreams, vanilla for sweetness, eucalyptus for clarity. "Callie?" Elowyn's small voice was drowsy but content. "Are you going to stay forever?" The question hit Callie like a physical blow. She'd been in enough temporary situations to know that forever was a luxury she couldn't afford to believe in. "I'm here now," she said instead, smoothing Elowyn's golden hair. "That's what matters." "But what if Daddy sends you away? What if I do something wrong and you leave like everyone else?" Callie's heart broke at the fear in the little girl's voice. She sat on the edge of the bed, taking Elowyn's small hands in hers. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You are not responsible for other people's choices. You are smart and brave and wonderful, and anyone who can't see that is missing out." Elowyn smiled sleepily, her trust absolute. "I love you, Callie." "I love you too, sweetheart," Callie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As she left Elowyn's room, Callie nearly collided with Damien in the hallway. He stood in the shadows like a spectre, his ice-blue eyes unreadable in the dim light. His white dress shirt was wrinkled from a long day, the top buttons undone to reveal the wolf tattoo that seemed to pulse with its own life. "She's asleep," Callie said quietly, suddenly aware of how intimate this moment felt. "I heard what you told her," Damien said, his voice rough, "about not being responsible for other people's choices." Callie tensed, wondering if she'd overstepped. "I just wanted her to know that she's enough, exactly as she is." "And what about you?" The question surprised them both. Damien stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Do you believe you're enough?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Callie had spent her entire life being told she wasn't enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not worthy enough to be chosen, to be kept, to be loved. "I'm learning to," she whispered. Damien's hand rose as if to touch her face, then stopped inches from her skin. The air between them crackled with tension, with possibilities neither of them was ready to name. "Callie," he said, her name rough on his tongue, "there are things about my world, about who I am, that you don't understand, things that could put you in danger just by being here." "I know what you are," she said quietly. "I've always known, but I also know what you are to Elowyn, and that's all that matters to me." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or something deeper. "You're not afraid?" Callie thought about all the things that had terrified her over the years: hunger, homelessness, the constant fear of being thrown away like garbage. Then she thought about Elowyn's laughter, about the safety she felt within these walls despite knowing they were built on violence and blood. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but not of you. I'm afraid of caring too much, of letting myself believe this could last." Damien's control cracked, just for a moment, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "You gave me back my daughter," he said, his voice barely audible. "What could be worth more than that?" Before either of them could answer, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the mansion, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Damien's transformation was instantaneous. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by the cold, deadly predator who'd built an empire on violence. "Get to Elowyn," he commanded, his Glock appearing in his hand. "Lock the door and don't come out until I come for you." As alarms began to wail and the mansion erupted into chaos, Callie ran toward Elowyn's room with her heart hammering against her ribs. The war had come to their sanctuary. The attack lasted 17 minutes. Callie knew because she counted every second while crouched in Elowyn's walk-in closet, the little girl trembling in her arms as gunfire echoed through the mansion like deadly thunder. She'd grabbed Elowyn from her bed the moment the first window exploded, following Damien's emergency protocols that she'd memorized, but never thought she'd need. "Callie, I'm scared," Elowyn whispered, her small body shaking against Callie's chest. "I know, baby, I know," Callie murmured, stroking the child's hair with hands that refused to stop trembling. "But your daddy is the strongest man in the world, and he's going to keep us safe." Outside the closet, she could hear Victor's voice barking orders, the heavy footsteps of security personnel, and underneath it all, the cold, deadly calm of Damien orchestrating their defense. When silence finally fell over the mansion, it was somehow more terrifying than the chaos had been. A soft knock on the closet door made Callie's heart stop. "It's over," Damien's voice came through the wood, rough with exhaustion and relief. "You can come out now." Callie emerged from the closet, with Elowyn still clinging to her, and the sight that greeted her made her stomach lurch. Damien stood in the doorway, his white shirt torn and stained with blood. His platinum Rolex was cracked, and there was a cut along his jaw that made the wolf tattoo on his neck seem to snarl in the dim light. "Daddy!" Elowyn launched herself from Callie's arms into her father's, and Damien caught her with the desperate grip of a man who'd almost lost everything. "I'm here, Principessa," he murmured against her hair, his voice breaking slightly on the endearment. "I'm right here." Over Elowyn's head, his ice-blue eyes found Callie's, and she saw something in them that made her knees weak. Gratitude, relief, and a raw vulnerability that he usually kept hidden behind walls of ice and steel. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Callie shook her head, not trusting her voice. She wasn't physically hurt, but something inside her had fundamentally shifted. During those 17 minutes of terror, she'd realized that this man and this child had become her entire world. "Victor's handling cleanup," Damien said, his voice returning to its usual controlled calm. "But we need to talk." An hour later, after Elowyn had been settled back in bed with Rosa standing guard, Callie found herself in Damien's office, facing a truth she'd been trying to avoid. The attack hadn't been random. It had been a message, a warning from Vincent Romano. "It was my fault," Callie said quietly, standing before Damien's desk. "Vincent Romano called earlier. He mentioned me specifically, said I was a distraction. If I hadn't been here—" "Stop!" Damien's voice cut through her self-recrimination like a blade. He stood behind his desk, his hands braced on the polished surface, and she could see the barely controlled fury radiating from him. "Vincent Romano is a dead man walking. What happened tonight has nothing to do with you." "But he's right, isn't he?" Callie pressed. "I am a distraction. I'm a weakness he can exploit. As long as I'm here, I'm putting Elowyn in danger." Damien moved around the desk with predatory grace, stopping close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his ice-blue eyes. "You think you're a weakness?" he asked, his voice deadly soft. "You, who kept my daughter calm and safe while bullets flew through my house. You who followed emergency protocols perfectly. You, who put yourself between Elowyn and danger without a second thought." "I'm nobody," Callie whispered, the words torn from her throat like a confession. "I'm a girl from nowhere with nothing to offer. You could replace me tomorrow with someone better qualified." Damien's control finally snapped. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she was crying. "Listen to me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "In my world, I deal with politicians who sell their souls for votes, with businessmen who smile while they stab you in the back. But you're real, you're honest. You love my daughter not because I pay you to, but because she's worthy of love. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Callie stared up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility that never left his shoulders. "Damien," she whispered, his name feeling strange and intimate on her tongue. "I've been dead inside for 3 years, he continued, his thumb still stroking her cheeks. "Going through the motions, building my empire, but feeling nothing. Then you walked into my house and brought it back to life." The confession hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they should cross. "This is crazy," she breathed. "You're you and I'm—" "Mine," he finished, the word coming out like a growl. "You're mine, Callie, and I protect what's mine." Before she could respond, his mouth was on hers. The kiss was desperate and hungry. 3 years of loneliness and want poured into the connection of lips and breath and heartbeats that suddenly synchronized. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered, the word a plea rather than a command. "Whatever comes next, whatever Romano throws at us, stay and fight it with me." Callie looked into his eyes and saw her future, dangerous and uncertain, but filled with more love and purpose than she'd ever dared to dream. "Okay," she whispered back. "I'll stay." Outside, Seattle's rain continued to fall, washing the blood from the mansion's windows. But inside, in the sanctuary of Damien's office, two broken souls found something worth fighting for. Neither of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from the garden wall, or the telephoto lens that captured their embrace through the window. Vincent Romano's patience was legendary, but his memory was longer. The real war was just beginning. 3 days after the attack, the Villaroche mansion felt like a fortress under siege. Security had been tripled, bulletproof glass installed, and every entrance monitored. But despite the increased protection, Callie could feel the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Damien had been different since their kiss, more protective, more possessive, but also more distant. He watched her with an intensity that made her skin burn, but he hadn't touched her again, hadn't even been alone with her. "He's scared," Elowyn said matter-of-factly as Callie helped her practice piano in the music room. The little girl's fingers moved confidently over the keys now, her blindness no longer a barrier. "Daddy gets quiet when he's scared. What makes you think he's scared?" Callie asked. "Because he loves you," Elowyn said simply. "And he's never loved anyone except Mommy and me. It's scary to love someone new." Out of the mouths of babes, Callie's heart clenched at the child's wisdom. The sound of raised voices from the foyer cut her off. Callie recognized Victor's gravelly tone, but the woman's voice was unfamiliar, cultured, sharp, and clearly angry. "I don't care what your boss is doing," the woman was saying. "I have every right to see my goddaughter." Callie's blood ran cold. Goddaughter. That could only mean one person. "Stay here," she told Elowyn quietly. "Keep playing. I'll be right back." She slipped out of the music room and down the hallway, stopping just out of sight of the foyer. Through the marble archway she could see a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, blonde, wearing a designer coat that probably cost more than Callie made in a year. Isabella Crane, if the society pages were to be believed. "Miss Crane," Victor was saying with strained politeness, "Mr. Villaroche is in a meeting. If you'd like to make an appointment—" "I don't need an appointment to see family," Isabella snapped. "Where is he? And where's Elowyn?" The dismissive way she said hired help made Callie's cheeks burn. She was about to retreat when Damien's voice cut through the tension. "Isabella." He descended the grand staircase with predatory grace, his white dress shirt immaculate, his platinum Rolex catching the light. The wolf tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with life. "This is unexpected." "Damien." Isabella's voice softened, became almost purring. "You look tired. This whole situation must be taking a toll on you." "What situation would that be?" His tone was carefully neutral, but Callie could hear the danger underneath. "Everyone's talking about how you've been distracted lately. Vincent Romano is circling like a shark, and instead of handling business, you're playing house with some little nobody." Callie's stomach dropped. She should leave, should go back to Elowyn, should pretend she hadn't heard. But she found herself frozen, waiting for Damien's response. "Careful, Isabella," he said quietly, his voice dropping to the deadly calm that meant someone was about to get hurt. "You're talking about someone under my protection." "Protection?" Isabella laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "Is that what we're calling it? Damien, she's a maid, a pretty little distraction, I'm sure, but hardly worth risking everything you've built." "And what exactly do you think I've built?" Damien asked, moving closer to Isabella. "An empire," Isabella said, her voice breathless as he invaded her personal space. "Power, respect, fear, everything your father dreamed of and more. But empires fall when their rulers get sentimental." Callie pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering as she watched the scene unfold. She could see the calculation in Isabella's eyes, the practiced seduction of a woman who'd never been denied anything she wanted. "You think I've gone soft," Damien murmured, his hand coming up to trace Isabella's jaw. "I think you've forgotten who you are," Isabella whispered back. "But it's not too late. Send the girl away. Handle Romano the way your father would have." For a moment, Callie thought he might actually consider it. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, Then Damien smiled, the cold, deadly smile that had made him legendary. "You're right about one thing," he said softly. "I had forgotten who I am, but not in the way you think." His hand moved from Isabella's jaw to her throat, not squeezing but making his point clear. "I am Damien Villaroche. I built this empire not through fear alone, but through loyalty, through protecting what matters. And right now, what matters most to me is upstairs learning piano from a woman who sees her worth, not her limitations." Isabella's eyes widened as she realized her miscalculation. "Damien, you will not speak about Callie again," he continued, his voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "You will not question my choices, my priorities, or my methods, and you will sure as hell not waltz into my home and threaten what's mine." He released her and stepped back. "Victor will see you out, and Isabella, don't come back." As Victor escorted a stunned Isabella toward the door, Damien turned and looked directly at the archway where Callie was hiding. Their eyes met across the marble expanse, and she saw something in his gaze that made her knees weak, possession, protection, and a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Come here," he said quietly, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. Callie emerged from her hiding spot, her cheeks burning with embarrassment at being caught eavesdropping. But as she approached him, she saw no anger in his expression, only tenderness. "How much did you hear?" he asked when she stopped in front of him. "Enough," she admitted. "Enough to know that you just chose me over your past, over what might be easier." "I chose us," he corrected, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I chose our family, our future, our chance at something real." "Even though it's dangerous? Even though it makes you a target?" Damien's smile was soft and genuine, so different from the cold mask he wore for the world. "Tesoro, I've been a target since the day I was born, but for the first time in my life, I have something worth the risk." He leaned down and kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Callie could hear piano music drifting from the music room, Elowyn playing a piece she'd learned by heart. "She's right, you know," Callie said against his lips. "Elowyn, she said you love me." "Smart girl," Damien murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Takes after her new mother." The word hit Callie like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her eyes fill with tears. "Damien, marry me," he said simply, as if he were asking her to pass the salt. "Not because it's practical or strategic or safe. Marry me because I love you, because Elowyn loves you, because we're already a family in every way that matters." Callie stared up at him, this dangerous, powerful man who'd just offered her everything she'd never dared to dream of. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once I say yes, I'm never letting you go." Damien's laugh was rich and warm, transforming his face from intimidating to breathtaking. "Callie Moreno, I've been waiting my whole life for someone to refuse to let me go." "Then yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, yes." As he spun her around the marble foyer, both of them laughing like children, neither of them noticed the black sedan pulling away from the mansion's gates. Vincent Romano sat in the back seat, his phone pressed to his ear. "The girl stays," he was saying, "which means we escalate. I want everything. Financials, family, weak points." He ended the call and stared back at the mansion. Damien Villaroche thought love made him stronger, but Vincent knew better. Love made a man vulnerable, gave him something that could be taken away, and Vincent Romano specialized in taking things away, years later. The morning sun painted Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and rose, casting long shadows across the Villaroche mansion's gardens, where Callie sat watching Elowyn practice her morning routine. At 10 years old, Elowyn moved through the world with a confidence that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. "Mama, listen to this," Elowyn called out, her fingers dancing across the portable keyboard. The melody that flowed was hauntingly beautiful, a composition of her own creation. "That's incredible, sweetheart," Callie said, her hand instinctively moving to rest on the gentle swell of her belly where their second child grew. "What inspired it?" "It's the song of our family," Elowyn said simply. "I can hear it sometimes when we're all together. It sounds like home." Callie's eyes filled with tears, happy tears that came easily these days. Their wedding had been small and perfect, held in the mansion's garden with only family present. Victor had walked her down the aisle, while Elowyn scattered rose petals. The Romano threat had been neutralized 6 months after their engagement, when Vincent's own lieutenants grew tired of his increasingly erratic behavior. Damien's empire was stronger than ever, but these days he ruled it from home more often than not. "There are my girls." Damien's voice carried across the garden as he emerged from the house, already dressed in his signature white dress shirt. The wolf tattoo on his neck had been joined by a small musical note behind his ear, Elowyn's symbol, inked there on the day he'd officially adopted Callie's name, as well as her heart. His platinum Rolex caught the morning light as he bent to kiss Callie's forehead, his hand joining hers on her belly. "How are we feeling today?" "Perfect," Callie said, and meant it. "Absolutely perfect." As Damien settled beside her, Elowyn abandoned her keyboard to curl up between them. This was their morning ritual: coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Elowyn, and the kind of peaceful silence that came from being exactly where they belonged. "Daddy," Elowyn said suddenly, her voice thoughtful, "do you think the baby will be able to see?" "I don't know, Principessa," Damien said honestly. "Would it matter?" Elowyn considered this seriously. "No," she said finally, "because if they can't see with their eyes, Mama and I will teach them to see with their heart. That's better anyway." Callie and Damien exchanged a look over their daughter's head, one of those wordless communications that married couples perfect over time. In it was love, gratitude, and the shared knowledge that they'd found something precious, a family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and commitment and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. The mansion that had once felt like a beautiful prison now hummed with life and laughter. They'd found something that eluded most people in their world: genuine happiness, the kind that came not from power or wealth, but from being truly known and unconditionally loved. As the morning sun climbed higher, painting the garden in shades of gold and green, the Villaroche family sat together in perfect contentment. They'd survived the storms, weathered the threats, and emerged stronger than before. Their story was far from over. But as they sat in their garden, surrounded by music and laughter and the kind of love that conquered all, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. That was everything.